What is up, guys? Welcome to the ThinkComputers Weekly Tech Podcast. This is episode 388, and our podcast is brought to you by Amazon. If you go to thinkcomputers.org/Amazon and happen to purchase something, that gives a little kickback and keeps the podcast ongoing. With me, of course, is my faithful co-host, Ryan. What's going on?
Not much. It's like I was just thinking earlier in the week, it was Monday, and I was like starting the week. I was a little tired. And like it's already Wednesday evening. We're here for the podcast. These weeks have just been flying by, and the year 2023 is almost over. It's insane. Like,
it's so crazy to think about that. I mean, it's a month away from CES. It's the end of the year. Christmas is coming. It's pretty wild. It gets busy, bro. Everybody's so busy. I'm so busy. I'm sure you're incredibly busy.
Like these weekends are just like, you should see the calendar in our kitchen, right? We like are always checking on it, trying to figure out what's going on this weekend, what's coming up the rest of the week. Like it's insane. So it's just go.
Yeah, well, we have a special episode this week. We've only had a handful of guests on this podcast on our 388 episodes, but we're having a special one this week with JJ from ASUS. We're going to bring him on in a second, but before we do, I did want to let you guys know that we do have our full show notes page that is going to have everything that we're going to be talking about, as well as all the products that he's going to be talking about. So if you see something you like, we do have all the links here. So definitely check that out. But let's just go ahead and bring JJ in here and say what's up. How's it going?
Hi, fantastic, man. I think you guys, well, at least Bob, you're in my seam in the neck of the woods. Is it raining where you're at? I'm getting a little bit of rain finally.
It did not rain. I went outside earlier today and it didn't rain, but I haven't been outside since. So
okay, so maybe right. Yeah, I mean, Californians, like it's like the double-edged sword, right? 300 days of sunshine. We tend to get spoiled about that, but at the same time, when the rain finally comes, we're super grateful because we always need it. But,
for sure.
No, man, I'm just like Ryan said, right? End of the year for us, it's super busy. We've got tons of products that we've recently just gone ahead and launched, and we've got a lot more coming in for CES 2024. So for me, it's all hands on deck in terms of actually jumping into all this hardware. But as you know, just like you guys, I'm a hardware enthusiast, so I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, nice. Now, before we get into products, I know. I mean, I've known you for forever, it seems like at this point. But if you want to,
well, I mean, I've been with ASUS for 15 years, and we first met right when I started TPR. So as far as kind of the point of contact, inside baseball, guys, TPR is our term in the industry for like your point of contact when you reach out to a company, you maybe have technical questions, or you're reaching out for a review inquiry about something. I was that point of contact, and that's how I met Bob and the ThinkComputers team, and so that was at least probably a decade ago, something like that.
Yeah. But for everybody who doesn't know, can you give us like a little intro of kind of what you do at ASUS and, I guess, just basically what you do.
Yeah. No worries. So like I said, if I'm new for you guys, you've never seen my face before, you might have seen me in different videos. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different media at different times, done stuff for ASUS as well. But my current role is actually a PR relations manager for North America. So that's a recent transition for me. Prior to that, I served as our senior technical marketing manager for more than 5.5 years. And prior to that, I served as actually the primary point of contact for North American technical media for the review. And really kind of what my job is at the end of the day is to be a conduit for the community, a conduit for the media, the conduit for our partners to be able to take their feedback, right? Also internally kind of dialogue, bring my experience, my expertise to that, kind of combine it together and coordinate with our product management team, our design team to hopefully put out the best products that we can. And I've been really lucky. over the time frame that I've been with ASUS to be able to be part of discussions in the framework, to be able to design, develop, and release new features, new functions, new products. And it's been super gratifying. But that's where I'm at now. And now for 2024, really the focus is, I think, at helping the community. So your viewership and the PC DIY community abroad, hopefully be aware of the breadth and depth of what we have in terms of our product portfolio, which is pretty crazy. I think you would probably agree, Bob. Not too many companies, Ryan, I don't know what your thoughts are. Not too many companies probably have as big as a product stack as we do. So it's a little bit of a challenge, but it's fun.
It's been interesting to see it grow over the years too.
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty wide. When I was looking at show notes, like it just kept scrolling down, and I was like, "All right, like we're getting a wide range of things we're talking about tonight." So it's always great.
Yeah, and looks like we got some commentary for the community. Somebody's going, "I miss Mini DTX." It's very interesting. I remember being part of the actually the team when we created concepts for like things like the Impact series, which brought DTX, and it's actually one of the most gratifying things, kind of being part of ASUS, is that we have a really big R&D pipeline. So we're not afraid to swing. We're interested in always trying something new, pushing the design envelope. Sometimes it can be challenging though, because sometimes you might be a little bit ahead of the curve, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to some products, and that ends up being the case, I think, with something like Mini DTX. I think on paper it sounds really, really cool, but there's always these changes. There's compatibility factors, all these different things that kind of come into play. But never say never. Who knows what comes down the pipe? Even with the last refresh for like AM5, when we did Mini ITX, we were again kind of thinking out of the box, right? We said, hey, there's literally 2 chipsets on the motherboard. We don't got enough room. Let's actually remove the audio from the whole motherboard, create an external enclosure, right, that actually has the audio DAC, upgrade that, put a fan controller in it, have hardware overclocking controls, have USB pass through. And like, it was interesting. And the community was like, wow, this is different, right? Like they didn't, but we had to kind of deal with the constraint of like, how do you literally fit 2 chips on a motherboard, still give the community what they're looking in terms of features and functions, right? And still bring it all in that size. So yeah, we're always trying stuff out.
Nice. Well, obviously it is a holiday season, and that means typically you're buying stuff. You're either buying stuff for yourself, you're getting money from relatives to buy things, or you have time off. So you're buying things to play games because you actually have time off from work. It's usually one of those things. And there's always a ton of deals around this time. I mean, we just had Black Friday, but there's always holiday deals. I feel like the holiday season is when most people buy a new PC or buy parts to build a new PC, except for, when there's like a specific launch, a graphics card or something like that. But for the most part, I think holiday season is where we find most people buying PC parts. So we wanted to go through a bunch of different segments that ASUS has, and they do have a lot, like JJ said. But we want to start with the motherboards and Z790 refresh, some of the boards that you had there.
Yeah, so let me go ahead and bring up a couple of images here and kind of go through, I think, a little bit of kind of the breadth and depth, I think, to kind of give some context in terms of what we brought around for this generation. So, of course, Z790 is nothing necessarily new, right? Of course, we had, an original launch with 12th gen and 13th gen, and it's important to note, right, all your socket 1700 series motherboards, right, with a UEFI update, they can essentially support any one of those 1700 series CPUs, right? So you might still find Z690 series motherboards out there on the market, and they can entirely, of course, work. You just drop in the UEFI and you're good to go. So from our perspective, anytime a refresh comes to the market, we're trying to evaluate what is the kind of the feedback that we're getting from the community, what can we make improvements upon, right? And what do we do in that respect? And so with the Z790 refresh, we didn't refresh our entirety of our stack, but we had a pretty big refresh in terms of actually the number of boards. So I'm going to go into some of the high level things that are kind of interesting. I've actually got a couple of the boards here on hand on to kind of show a couple of little cool things. And maybe if some people are interested in a little bit of a cool overclocking demo, we can actually show something there off that I think is pretty cool. But Tough Gaming is our entry to the actual kind of gaming lineup we have. We have 3 different series, Tough Gaming, ROG Strix, and ROG Maximus. So it's kind of like a good, better, best mentality. So this board comes in at 280. And for, I think, probably 85% of everybody out there, you probably don't need literally anything more than this. I mean, it's got, 4M.2 that are going to be on there. You've got 2.5 gigabit networking. You've got high performance Wi-Fi 6E, a strong, robust VRM, 20 gigabits USB connectivity on there. It's got our AI OC overclocking technology, a lot of really good stuff. So unless you start going into the aesthetics or specialized features and functions, really, really strong foundation. And from a performance perspective, also I want to make it super clear, there's no performance differential between this and literally like my Apex Encore, which is going to be substantially more expensive. Might you get kind of some performance tuning benefits for somebody that's a little bit more of an enthusiast? Yes, but it's not going to be a huge differential as far as just stock to stock performance. So that was one update that we had. Let me
I
go
think
ahead
that's a
and
great point to make too, because a lot of times, people think that they've got to go to that highest end board or spend so much more money because they think they're going to lose out on performance or options. So I think that's an awesome point you just made there about it, being
Yeah,
on par
100%.
with
I see
those.
that kind of that commentary a lot, whether it's on a Reddit page and a YouTube comment, something people kind of just jump in. They're like, hey, is it going to perform? Is it going to thermal throttle? Am I not going to get,
Hmm.
and I'm like, no, again, 1400K in here, actually in the demo, I'm going to show you it's on the Tough Gaming motherboard. So everything I'm literally doing is on the most entry board. So it's not even on the highest end board that we offer within our product stack. So next movement up, you're going to get in terms of the product stack is going to be the ROG Strix series. So here we've got 3 models, and positioning wise, the lettering scheme, -A is always the white model, -F is going to be positioned under E, and E would be our highest end model. So that would be right before we go into the Maximus series. And so it's always pretty easy if you just want to kind of think about it. What are you getting as an upgrade? Pretty much all the spec gets upgraded. You get more USB ports. You're going to upgrade to things like native PCI Express Gen 5 support. You'll see that you have like even more M.2 SSD heatsinks. All the boards at a minimum release 4, but everything on the ROG side moves up to 5. So you went from 4 M.2 to 5 M.2. So it's subtle things, right? But the spec always across the board, whether it's say things like the number of fan headers, the number of slots on the board, the USB, the audio, everything always gets upgraded. So you never essentially think, if I went with an ROG Strix board, you would essentially be losing out on something that might be on the Tough Gaming model. You're always going to pretty much go up, if that makes sense, right? And if you're in that trend of, wanting to something be kind of bold and bright, then definitely the -A is a great model, I think, for a lot of people out there. And again, doesn't break the bank, as far as being pretty reasonable, and a really, really nice SKU. A little subtle cool thing too that some people don't realize, that we do also kind of differentiate between ROG, Strix, and Tough Gaming, is that all the ROG boards come integrated with memtest built into the UEFI BIOS. So when you're kind of like first building your system and you're setting up, it's pretty cool because you can literally just get your system, you can post it, and instead of having to maybe install your OS, run into a crash, have an issue or something like that, you can kind of run that initial sanity check and make sure that everything is working okay. If your memory checks out, then you can go ahead and proceed to actually go ahead and install your operating system.
Very cool.
And on the high end side, right, for a lot of people, definitely people know for ASUS, we got, of course, our really kind of premium based boards. And so this is going to be our flagship series product. So here we have the Maximus series. So we've got the Dark Hero, we have the Apex Encore, and we have the Formula. I think an absolutely stunning boards. They just all look, I think, really, really amazing. I'm biased, but I think we do have probably the best IDs guys in the business as far as, just the fit, the finish, the polish, the attention to detail. Looks really great. That Formula is a new model because we didn't actually have it originally for Z790. We had it previously in Z690. We held out, and now we actually are bringing it back. So we have that white edition because in the original Z790 launch, we had a high-end whiteboard with the Apex, but it was white. So here we kind of did a flip. We went back to the Apex, we made it black, and then we made the Formula white. It was kind of like an opposite, right? Where the Formula used to be in black, and we made that white. So sometimes trying to change a little bit things up. So that's overall Maximus across the board. And again, if you're kind of just wondering what are some of those high level differences, again, you're kind of upgrading everything. Example would be all the Maximus series, except for the Apex. You get things like Thunderbolt 4, USB 4 is going to be built onto the motherboard. Take, for instance, of course, going to have higher level of even power delivery, more USB ports, and of course, even higher levels of aesthetic refinement, right? Where, you got this really kind of nice, what we call polymo lighting design, which is pretty cool. It's like a dual layer design. You can actually switch between different patterns. So it's not just something like as simple as like a little badge that lights up, if that kind of makes sense. Where, if we look at the Strix model, still looks quite nice, but it's much more of kind of simple, small logo that kind of lights up, right? One thing that I would note here, though, and let me see if I can pull the board out here. I got my bag of magic holding, as it is for you guys that might play some D&D or some tabletop. But if I show you the board right here, it's almost kind of crazy that you'll see how chrome that actually design is and how nice it looks without actually any RGB lighting on it. And we do that on purpose. And part of the reason why is because the value proposition for people that are kind of building systems, not everybody wants to have RGB. And so we are conscious about making sure that the board has a really strong design ID, even without any lighting. But the moment that you go ahead and enable lighting, you get kind of different look and feel. So that's overall the 3 new models there. And lastly here, I just want to kind of show you one quick slide here on some of the design differences. So give me 1 second to bring this one up here and show you here, like on something. We can do it for the Dark Hero, take for instance. So some people kind of wonder, like, what do you kind of do from generation to generation? So you'll see here from this model to this model, we went from 5 slots to 5 slots, but previously we had like an add-in card that you needed to use. Here, all 5 slots are now natively on the motherboard. You went to native Gen 5 support. One thing that you'll also might wonder about is, why do you see kind of like 2 slots on the board? We do that because we actually have a higher level of water cooling enthusiasts for something like a Maximus board. So some users, for aesthetic purposes, they might actually want to drop their card down to a different slot, maybe show a little bit more of the top off, right? Just kind of a different aesthetic. We also have certain segment of the market that might use this board for the spec, but maybe they're into content creation. They're doing something like DaVinci Resolve, maybe 3D Studio Max, Blender, and they actually can use 2 GPUs. So they might use something like 2 of our ProArt cards, which are 2.5 slots, and you can actually space them ideally between that, and you can actually have 2 graphics cards. But of course, gaming, we know there's no more NVLink, there's no Crossfire. So for gaming, it's not for gamers. It's actually, oddly enough, it's for either flexibility or for creators. Wi-Fi 7, of course, is there on all the boards except for the Tough Gaming model. The Tough Gaming model is Wi-Fi 6E. Everything else is Wi-Fi 7. The QDIM is a pretty cool little feature here. I want to show you here in a second. It'll take about like a minute to show you, but I think it's subtle, but it's pretty cool. AMP2 is a pretty cool feature. Reinforced USB header, which is kind of interesting. If you look right here at this little header, you'll notice it's got silver around it versus the old header did not. And you might go, well, why did you guys do something so as that? And if anybody's done it, Bob, I think you take a look at the chassis, right? Have you ever pulled a header from a motherboard?
Oh, I've pulled headers off. I was just thinking, like, yeah, this has saved me because, there's so many times you're just, especially reviewing cases, you're like taking parts in and out and you unplug that really quickly. And something you unplug the entire, like, you pull the whole thing out. And you're just like, did I really just do that? And
and then you of course have those pins exposed. Like, you can sometimes put the housing back in, right?
Yeah,
but it can just be a bare. So we actually found from feedback from the community, they were like, hey, is there any way that you can make that better? And so that's just one of those subtle things. You might not realize that when you're going to the higher end model, that's just that little attention to detail that we're trying to kind of give even a more premium design. So we're doing something like reinforcing those headers. One other cool thing that we also introduced that probably most of your community is aware of, or maybe they're not, depending on when they last built a system, but I love this feature, is the easy eject mechanism that ASUS pioneered for what we call Q release. So if you've ever had that bane, like right here, you can see in my demo system, I've got a big old 4090, right? But if you had a graphics card and you're trying to remove that graphics card, upgrade, maybe mount in an SSD, do something, how many people know the pain? They either take like an ESD sprudger, they take a flathead screwdriver, they're doing something, and they're jamming it into the slot.
I have a flathead screwdriver sitting on the desk over here just for that reason.
It makes me sweat just thinking about it.
Yeah,
exactly. But now the great thing is literally right here on the motherboard, there's literally a button right here, and all I need to do is just depress that button. And I actually hold on. I think I got a GPU here. Reach into the bag of holding. So if I were to do this and take my motherboard, I have a top-down cam, but let's go ahead and do that. So right there, you can see graphics card's installed, right? Now, normally, of course, if I was to go pull this, I can't pull it out, right? I would normally have to kind of draw it to go and get to that latch and do everything I need to. But now I can just go ahead and hold down that button. Let me see if I can do this with the way the positioning is. But you can see right there, press the button and I just pulled the graphics card out, right? So that is even all the way down, again, on the Tough Gaming model. So it's a really cool feature that we now continue to offer. Just helps to make the kind of the DIY experience just that much easier, that much nicer.
You know what's funny is when you were showing the picture of the Tough, that's the first thing that I noticed.
Oh, that it had
it. Yeah. Because again, I deal with that all the time, and just having the button there just makes life so much easier.
Yeah, I remember when we released that feature, there was just a huge number of reviewers that were kind of talking to me, and they were like, hey, for like GPU test bed setup, so the guys that are kind of doing, they're like, I want a board that has that, just because like I'm always taking out the graphics, right?
Yeah, it makes all the difference.
But you can see here's the Tough Gaming board. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you a little bit of top down. So give me 1 second to go ahead and put this over here, and I want to show you something actually physically on the board. So you can go ahead and drop off that share screen there for a second. And give me one moment here. Yeah. So looking at the boards there, just quickly, which one was your visually, right? Because of course, I mean, you could jump into the spec, you could jump into the feature, but which one called out to you? Which one said like, ooh, I like
that
the
white
ID
formula is sweet. I love that, and the fact that it's got the option for the liquid cooling, right?
Yep, that is correct.
I think
I
that's.
do want to note that just for clarity, because some people get confused. You do not need to at all liquid cool the VRM on the formula board. That's actually been designed to be both passive and active. So it's 100%. Even if you overclock the CPU, that board, actually the vast majority, close to probably 70% of formula users, I think actually the polling data might even be higher than that, might be actually over 80%, don't actually water cool the board at all. They buy it for the spec and for the look, right? But they don't water cool it. But 100%, if you want to, you can integrate into the loop. And I think actually somebody in the community, I think it might have been Nelson or somebody noted actually in there that, yes, our friends over at EK, they did actually go ahead and release what they call the VRM bridge. So that's actually a cool little attachment that gives you a really kind of cool aesthetic tie-in where it loops into there and then also goes into the monoblock for the CPU. You get this really, really cool look, right? But let me go ahead and grab my PSU here.
What was your favorite, Bob?
I would say the same. I think I might have reviewed the first ever formula board with the integrated water cooling, and it was like one of the coolest things at the time because it was the first one, and you had never seen anything like that before. And I'm a huge fan. I mean, I have a white build beside me, so having an all white is just I just love the white.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful look. Yeah, I might but maybe before we transition, the next thing I'll show just in person, because in person even looks better than the picture. But the cool thing I just want to show you here, it's really, really subtle. But one of the things that we got from a lot of feedback from people in the community over just years is when they install memory, especially sometimes first-time builders, maybe people that have been out of the game a little bit, maybe they built their system last like 3-4 years ago, they go to install the memory. What sometimes ends up happening is that people go to physically install the memory, but they don't fully seat the memory module. Right. And so we were like, well, how can we fix that? Well, let's actually look at it. So let me go ahead and switch over here to this cam. So we'll switch over here to the top. Hopefully you guys should see my Maximus board there. So yeah, there we can see we've got my Dark Hero right there. So here's your DIMM slots, right? So I'm going to go ahead and open one of these up, but let me connect my power supply quickly here. And cool thing is actually this works on a specialized circuit design on the board. So I don't need to install the CPU or anything like that. So give me one sec here. Oh, I'm hard shutting off my system without shutting it down. So JJ's running wild there. All right. All right. So you can actually you guys see that little LED light right there?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that little LED light right there. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a stick of memory. It doesn't matter. Any memory will work. Of course, always follow your rule. Look at that really nice polymo lighting design. It looks so cool. So we're going to go in. I'm going to take my stick of Patriot right here. So let's say maybe you did something like that. You didn't fully see it, right? You still see the LEDs lights on there. And so... sorry, hold on, wait, is this the engineer? Let me check, actually, is this the engineering sample? E2, yes, this is actually E2, so I do need to actually test it on this one. Okay, there we go. So you can actually see the LED has sequenced off, right? Mm-hmm. Because the circuit's actually now detected that essentially it's closed the loop. And so now here, if I go ahead and lift this, let me go ahead and lift this for you. So I'm not going to take out the module, I'm just going to lift this. Oh, actually, hold on, press the start button right there. Give it a second to discharge. We'll go back. Okay. And you can see I just lifted it. And so the LED now comes back on because it's essentially letting you know, hey, the memory is actually not fully seated in there, right? So a subtle little thing, essentially we call it dim detect. So it works in conjunction with those little 4 LEDs, but of course you notice this works even prior to you actually getting your build up and running, right? So again, this is part of what we call like kind of our quick design and kind of easy type of technologies that we try to help put on boards to make the experience easier for builders. So again, you notice now if I was to fully depress it, we'll actually sequence off and lets you know that the memory's been installed. So
that feature is active at any point in the build. Like if you were to have the CPU in and everything else, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, generally, of course, once you go into having your CPU installed, right, and your system was to post, then the memory would be working correctly. So
Sure.
the LEDs would actually change behavior, and then you would get that more traditional kind of like amber light, which would usually indicate to you a debug LED if you were like on the tough gaming board, because there's not a debug LED. But then here you might get maybe a an error code depending on what you might be doing, right, resonant to that. But the main reason why we implemented this was specifically because we would have users that sometimes would go in and they'd install, and like I said, they would just maybe get like partially, they wouldn't fully seat it, right? Like it's like even there, it looks like it might be fully installed. The user maybe thinks it's in there, but this is just that mechanism to help them know, like, hey, I need to make sure and go ahead and do this.
Very cool. I like that.
So cool little feature that you have there on that board. So I just wanted to kind of show you that there. So moving over, I think, into our last little demo here on the motherboard side that I think might be kind of interesting is, let me bring my power supply back over here, and I'll connect this back over to my Tough Gaming board. Is one of the cool things that we've done now for a few years, and you can go ahead and switch off to that for a second here. Give me a second.
Somebody was asking if you could implement that type of feature for other components of the motherboard, like maybe M.2 or something, right?
Yeah, so actually we kind of have already been brainstorming that to try to make that a little bit easier, like, hey, making sure the graphics card is fully seated, or even your M.2, because we've seen similar feedback. So we're kind of already thinking on that wavelength. It's just kind of that process. And
Cool.
There's even a lot of little things that we already do in that regard. Like, we were the first company, Bob, I don't know if you remember, there didn't used to be LED diagnostics on graphics cards.
Yeah.
It was just literally you would plug it in. And again, that was a track record. Literally, I think we did it almost like 9 years ago. ASUS was the first one. We put in a circuit that says, hey, when you plug this in, you know that the power is active. And we've actually even gone further for our latest graphics cards. We actually have a circuit that's built onto the graphics card. It's one of the kind of value props if you buy a Strix card that actually monitors the input from your PSU. So if you're actually operating power is in about it's out of compliance of the ATX spec for approximately about 10%, the LED will actually flash. And so it's kind of helping you to know, is your power supply kind of working optimally, if that makes sense. Doesn't mean your power supply is faulty, but it does mean that your power supply is kind of out of the normal tolerance of operating spec. Sometimes that can happen from fitment. Sometimes it could happen from maybe a wonky extension cable. Sometimes it could also happen from degradation to the PSU. But it's kind of just giving you a little bit of heads up and be like, hey, maybe you want to maybe run like a PSU load test, maybe check something out. Just a little bit kind of something to kind of know beyond like the Tough Gaming series. It's just a basic power LED to let you know, hey, power has been connected, but it doesn't have intelligence behind it in the same way that the Strix card does. So yeah, always kind of trying to do some cool stuff there. So I'd love to see community in the stream, in the chat, and Bob and you, Ryan, who overclocks their system? Raise a hand. So JJ overclocks the system.
Yeah.
Ryan overclocks, Bob overclocks. Yep, so then we can see maybe what the community might think, right? We know, though, from polling, actually only about maybe 25% of people do. A lot of people don't do it, even when they buy a K part and they have a good cooler, because either they think it takes too long, they're scared about burning something out, the time and the complexity of kind of understanding the components on how to address like things like instability or stability, right? And then also a fourth one, which is kind of complicated, which is just variance. Every CPU has its own characteristics. Some are a little bit better, some are a little bit worse. Even if you took 15 14900Ks or 13900Ks, they will all have a little bit of variance between them. Some have a higher level of voltage, it's called leakage, and other ones actually have a lower level voltage and they're less leaky. And that can affect things like the voltage you require and kind of the scaling. So long story short, what we did a few generations ago is we put a little chip on the motherboard. It's called a microcontroller. And that microcontroller essentially allowed us to store like a really advanced level of almost like an AI model. It took all kind of literally tens of thousands of hours that we had internally in the lab. We put it into that little chip. And now what happens is that when you turn on your motherboard, we sense your CPU. So we know, hey, this is a 13900K, a 14700K, a 12600K, doesn't matter. It'll work with any K-series part. We look at that. We figure out its voltage characteristics. And then critically, we also monitor your CPU cooler performance. So historically, when you would do like an overclock, your overclock would be what's called a basic preset. So it didn't really matter whether you had like a tower cooler, a 240 millimeter AO, or custom loop. That was kind of negative because you could imagine if I had like a Noctua U12S versus a 360 millimeter AO, my thermal headroom is quite a bit different. So if you had this fixed preset, you could actually enable an overclock and it could be too hot for the cooling solution that you have. But now we will condition the overclock specifically to the cooling solution you have. And the even cooler part is this is in continual level it's continually being monitored. So if, let's say, maybe the fan on your cooler maybe the bearing starts to go out, maybe the pump on your AIO gets weak, maybe you're like me in Northern Cali and you get into the summer and our summer is 115 degrees and your ambient temperature gets hotter, actually we can begin to adjust your overclock. So we could go like, hey, we notice your cooling score is actually going down a little bit. So we're going to bring down your actually overclock dynamically because we realize your cooling performance is lower. So how does this ultimately work? Let me actually show you here and show you actually kind of what the result would be, because you can literally do it in about a minute. And hopefully it breaks the convention of saying, manually tuning is the right way to do it because auto overclocking sucks, right? That's the mantra a lot of times from the community, right? So let me flip my system on here and we'll show this here. So there, and where's the one disadvantage on that Tough Gaming board? I don't have my nice little, my start button, right? So I got to go with the trusted screwdriver.
I was just saying, we got tools out.
Yeah, I gotta jump my board, right? So we'll go ahead and jump my board there. Hold on, there we go. All right, so we've gone ahead and jumped our board. And let me switch over here, and there we go. We're gonna just pop in the UEFI. Now you can enable this from within the operating system, guys. But right now, just to show you, because I want to show you fairly, right? I'm just going to go ahead and load defaults. I want to switch over here, and you can see right here, 100%, right? And I'm not gaming anything. I'm just going to go even 100%, quote unquote, stock. So we're just going to disable MCE, and we're just going to quickly go into Windows. Hold on, before I disable MCE, because we want to use XTU to show you guys a little something really quickly. I think I might need to make sure that this is enabled. That's just Intel's requirement for XTU to be shared. So we're going to bump into the OS. And all I want to show you guys here is essentially what the CPU characteristic would be like at pure stock, right? And then we're going to just compare that to what it would be once we turn it on and kind of just see what the potential kind of uplift is. Because a lot of times I think there's a supposed discussion that occurs that says modern CPUs, there's no point to overclocking them, right? Because they get too hot. But I think you guys have shown in your reviews, and Ryan, I know within your cooling doors, there's a big difference between synthetic kind of stress tests in terms of temperatures and what that puts on your CPU versus gaming workloads, right? We know in real world under gaming, a 12900K, 1300K, 1400K, it's actually runs pretty cool. Even with, a tower heatsink or an AIO, it's not actually getting very hot. Now, of course, if you jump into something like Cinebench or you're going to throw OCCT or Prime, it's going to be a different story, right? But for the vast majority, nobody's running Prime 95 on their computer, right?
So it's like unfair almost.
It's not a kind of
balanced
scenario, right? So we can see we've gone ahead and loaded up here. All I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to open up XTU. So we'll take a look at our result here. All right, hold on. I got a little bit of resize there. Yes, agree. Okay. All right. So we can see here's our value. Hopefully, can everybody see that okay, or do I need to magnify that a little bit? Is that okay?
Good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I can actually do this. Let me go ahead and just capture a quick shot, and we can zoom in. Plus, we'll want to have this for a quick reference. So there we go. We've got in our value here. So we can see, there we go, right? What is that? 58, 58, 58, 58, 58, 55, 55, 55, right? And then our E cores were cores 43, right? So that's pretty much what we've got. So let's go ahead and enable AIOC. We don't actually need to go back into the UEFI to do it, but we're just going to reboot because you do need to do that for rebooting. So I'm just going to open up our utility here. We'll go ahead and close out XTU. Open this up. And the really cool thing is, again, I'm showing this to you on the Tough Gaming board. This is something that we used to only offer on the ROG models, but we're really excited about now offering this now on the ROG series. excuse me, on the Tough Gaming series and not just the ROG series.
There's extra value there, which is nice.
Yeah, for sure. Especially like I said, because if you're somebody that's trying to min-max something here, this is an easy way to get more performance from your system. So we're going to go ahead and enable that. We're going to reboot, and that's it. So it's going to reboot, and then we're going to go ahead and take a look at the value. Yeah, well, we'll go from there. Like I said, the really cool part here is it's going to do all the advanced heavy lifting for us. So everything from tuning the voltage frequency curve, setting your multipliers, if it had to make adjustments to load light calibration, all those things happen to you. So you literally don't need to know about any of those things. You actually see a little message right there. It tells you your CPU cooler has been somewhat characterized. Do you want to go ahead and continue? So yeah, we want to continue. So we're going to go ahead and let it boot. Sorry, go ahead. And all it's asking you there is essentially if you wanted to continue having your cooler be tracked, essentially, if that makes sense, right? I prefer to always kind of have my cooler keep being tracked, like I said, for that kind of safety net that if anything happens to my cooler, it'll bring it down for me. If you wanted to not have it change, then of course you can pick that. So that's the cool thing, is that you have a lot of control over this. You can define exactly what you want to be able to do.
You kind of called that chip like almost like, I think you mentioned AI, right, for this process.
Yeah, so the
explaining
feature
it,
that we call it's called AIOC. That's what we've called it for, now like almost close to about 6.5 years. The actual chip that we physically have on the motherboard, if you go back here to that image on that I'm sharing, it's actually physically on the motherboard. It's a little microcontroller. And it's this what we call TPU chip. So there's actually a little chip right here. This is the little guy that was physically on there. So this is part of what you're paying for. You might not realize it because a lot of people just look at the number of USB ports, the number of SATA ports, maybe not SATA for a lot of people now, M.2, right? The internal USB header, it's got Wi-Fi, the VRM, but that's one of those things you're actually paying for. So let's go back here. We're at our desktop. We're going to go ahead and let it load up there for a second.
And then Robert in the chat, he asked, what did you enable? It's just the AI overclock within the Armory Crate?
That's literally it. And you can do that within the operating system, or you can do that within the BIOS. So you have either way that you can do this. And this is 100% working. Even though I triggered it from the OS, this is happening in the firmware. So we're doing this all on the hardware level, just like a user would. Like literally, even if you uninstalled Armory Crate, it wouldn't take away the overclock because it's tuned in and happening on the firmware level, right? So we're going to go in, we're going to go into advanced tuning, and now we have our result right here. So let's go ahead and we'll screenshot again. Let's go ahead and do that. All right, so we got our side-by-side. Now you can already see your E-core has already gone up, where our E-cores went from 43 to 46. Let's go ahead and do a little side-by-side here. So we're going to go to our images. Documents. Let's go to ShareX here. And so let's bring up one. So we're going to have one here. And we'll bring up the other there. Okay, so let's take a look at our two values. So there was stock, right? And here is our overclock, right? 6160. So that's already a 300 megahertz uplift on one core, right? 200 megahertz on those two cores. And then 3 cores, look at that. That's 500 megahertz uplift, right? 400 megahertz uplift there, right? You can see 55, 59, and then 200 megahertz there. So across the board. And so that's actually a pretty nominal increase, right? If you think about it, like this is right here, this is a 1300K. This is faster than a 1400K, right? By actually a notable margin, actually, in terms of now the performance. Now, the really cool part to it as well is that we still continue to use what's called an adaptive vid. So we don't use a static vid. So the voltage is actually still 100% dynamic. So if you actually just look, you'll see that the voltage actually right there, it's already 0.968, 0.37. The actual frequency is dropping down. Of course, there's services and stuff that's running in the background, but the point is that it actually runs exactly like a normal stock CPU. So it's still effective and efficient, right? But then at the same time, you actually have essentially that bump up for when you're in the game to be able to get the higher performance. So you can literally see it took us a minute to be able to enable it, reboot, and that was it. We didn't need to do anything else.
Very cool.
That's super cool.
A really, really robust, I think, really impressive feature. And the last thing that I'll show you here literally just takes a second. But let's say you were in that scenario. So you know, Bob, Ryan, you guys might tell me, JD, that sounds really cool, but what happens if it's not stable, overclocking, it's overclocking. You can't guarantee it. And our internal testing across, thousands of permutations, we would probably say that we expect probably close to 90% plus success rate in terms of stability. But let's just say that our predictive algorithm is maybe a little bit too aggressive. So if the user had a crash, it would be more challenging for them, because then they would have to know how to adjust the voltage frequency offset. What is the right voltage to do? Do I go up? What do I do? Do I change my multipliers? The whole point is to try to make it easy for them. So now the really cool thing that all they need to do is go to here to AI features. And if you scroll down here, there's a little thing that's called the optimism scale. All you need to do is tweak the optimism scale. So you can see it's 100%. Let me just drop that to 90. So it's just it'll take everything for you. It'll make all the adjustments and it'll slightly reduce those. And that's probably enough to pretty much bring you to 100% stability if you happen to be in the scenario. And the other really cool part is it works the other way, right? Maybe you're like, hey, can I actually get a little bit more? Well, flip it.
Let's go 110.
And you can go to 105 or you could go 110. And for the super, right, I think you'll dig this. For the people that want to overclock based off of temperature, we're doing stuff that would just be almost impossible to do manually. You can actually do temperature target threshold based overclocking. So that sounds really complicated, but literally all it means is I can go here. Let me set that back to like 100, but I could go and enable this and I could set this to 80. And now what that means is we're going to do whatever the maximum of the overclock is while analyzing the core package temp and say that we won't ever let the overclock exceed an 80 ADC temperature target. So if you want to be able to get much overclocking as you can, but never break 80 degrees, then you could do that. So
yeah, that's awesome.
An unprecedented, I think, really level of control, a really cool feature that we have in here. And the last part that I'll show you for people that always kind of want to know how much voltage is my CPU using? There's a crazy thing that little chip lets you do, where you actually have the ability that you can see right there inside the UEFI that over time, you can see your average voltage.
Nice.
So literally over a year, right, you could actually see, you could come back to your system and go like, what's the average voltage that's being supplied to my CPU? So pretty cool feature, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, this is very cool. Especially people who may want to get into overclocking, but they're not exactly sure. And they can kind of start with the AI overclock, just let it do its thing. But then, they maybe down the line, they upgrade to like a nicer AIO and they can set the thresholds or push that 100 to 105 or whatever it may be. I think that's incredibly cool.
And that whole demo there, just for reference there, that was actually done utilizing our Tough Gaming LC360, which is our latest kind of budget entry. Some people refer to that as our kind of entry-level AIO cooling solution there. So you'll see it right there on the screen. It's a really cool unit. It's got actually a new decoupled pump, which actually allows it to be quieter. So if you're a little bit more kind of sensitive or averse to pump noise, Ryan, I don't know if you've kind of caught that. Sometimes some pumps, depending on their speed, kind of the way that they're integrated in, can cause a little bit more noise. So it's a little bit of a different design. These are really nice balance in terms of their static pressure and their airflow. So also, you don't have any kind of proprietary cable controllers or anything like that. Just standard, 4-pin header, 3-pin ARGB header, really simple. One single cable for the AIO pump. So if you want a streamlined, kind of simple install, but really solid performance, really good option right for you here. And 240, 360, either one you can go with.
Nice. We did have a question. Robert in the chat said, is AI overclock on the Dark Hero 8 boards or only newer boards?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the AIOC is actually something that we have on all the Z790 series and even Z690 series motherboards. The only thing that would be new specifically for Z790 would be Tough Gaming. So Tough Gaming, like if you went and bought like the Tough Gaming Z790 Plus, which was the first Z790 Tough board, it wouldn't have AIOC, where the Tough Gaming Pro board, for the refresh, we did introduce it. But if you bought any one of the ROG Strix models, it doesn't matter the current ones or maybe V1 or even, again, Z690, all of those all had the AIOC feature.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving on from motherboards, I think one of the things that's one of the best upgrades, it just makes you feel better every time you sit down at your system, is a new monitor. And I think with new games coming out, new games being announced, a monitor is like one of the things. And when I got my big super ultra wide, it was one of the happiest days when I got it all set up. And every time I sit down here, I'm just like, so nice. So you had a few monitor models that some people might want they would kind of be interested in different price points and kind of different segments.
Yeah, let me just run through some of these, I think, pretty quickly. So let me quickly just open up a couple pages in the images here so we can kind of go through them. So give me 1 second here. I'll go ahead and just open here. So it's kind of interesting. Ryan, are you on team ultra wide? Or are you
I am
team...
not. I am.
He's on team many different size monitors all in one.
Multiple monitor pseudo ultra wide. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. See, I'm torn. Like I, from a certain kind of immersion factor, I can really love elements of an ultra wide, but because of course, you can have content that the moment that you run into a situation where it's not ultra wide, you get your black bars, stuff like that.
Yep.
For me, that's why I don't run personally in ultra wide. So I'm definitely like my two daily drivers right now is I have a 27-inch ROG Swift 1440p 360 hertz, and then our 27-inch OLED. So I have those two side by side. So it's like, one super kind of content based, and the other one is my general purpose, does kind of everything. And then large format side, PG32UQX is our 1600 nit 4K super HDR based monitor. So like if I really want to jump into something super bold, dynamic, bright, right? But here I wanted to pick a couple of things that were brand new, but I thought hit a really cool kind of balance that wasn't super expensive and could be a good option to maybe either upgrade or maybe for a first time build or something like that. So the model numbers, I know everybody's always like, man, monitor model numbers are tough.
Yeah.
But you will see here, it's the VG24QL3A. Really, the cool things about it is one, it's going to be a fast IPS. A lot of times in these kind of more entry displays, it might be an older kind of what are called like first gen or second gen IPS based panel. So those are going to generally have lower response times. They also might not have as high color coverage in terms of the actual color rendering performance. But here, if we look at it, this is, $190. Gets you 24 inches, 180 hertz, right? A fast IPS, that 1 millisecond gray to gray. Now that is peak because the average actually response time would be higher than that. You get full G-Sync compatibility. A lot of times you might not see that actually from a lot of monitors at the more aggressive price point. They might just quote unquote have FreeSync support or VRR support. And some people ask, but can I just force that, or doesn't VRR just work? What you may not realize is that if you force G-Sync operation, you can have sometimes dropouts. You can actually have things like black screens, you can have stutters, you can have weird anomalies. G-Sync actually compatibility does actually have to go through the G-Sync validation lab, and there can even be tuning that we do to what's called the scaler inside the monitor to make sure that it works correctly with the graphics card. So it just pretty much means that if somebody wants to make sure that they're running reliably that variable refresh rate experience with their NVIDIA graphics card, it will work. There are some advantages to the units that are higher end that have like the built-in G-Sync module, but we don't need to worry about that right now. The other really cool thing is variable overdrive. Without getting super technical, this essentially just means that the monitor is able to kind of compensate for the range of the refresh rate, because a lot of times when you're playing the game, you're not playing it at 180 frames a second, right? You're playing at 60, 80, 90, 120, 144. You could then bounce up to like 170, and you'll be kind of bouncing up and down. And there can be something that's called like overshoot, or certain things that kind of can negatively affect the image quality. And having variable overdrive is essentially the monitor attempting to make correct adjustments so that the motion clarity experience is maintained more consistently across the refresh range. Traditionally, you used to only see this on monitors that were about like 2 to 3 times more expensive. So seeing it at one that's only $190 is actually quite nice. And then we add into that 100%, pretty much almost 100% sRGB coverage, and even height adjustment, which is pretty rare for, again, a monitor this time. A lot of times these more entry monitors, it might have just like basic like tilt or something like that. That's like it. The fact that you have all that thrown in there, and all ASUS monitors actually have a 3-year warranty across the board, from our most entry display to our cheapest display. Actually, I think that is a really good kind of starting kind of gaming monitor, especially if you're jumping into Apex, Fortnite, stuff like that. One last really cool little feature that a lot of people don't know that we have on a lot of monitors that we've kind of pioneered is what we call Display Widget. So it's this cool little piece of software that allows you to control the on-screen display in Windows. So instead of you physically having to touch the buttons on your monitor, if you wanted to increase the brightness or change the contrast, or maybe go from like FPS mode to sRGB mode, right? You can do that all in Windows with your mouse. It's so much easier. It's just a much, much nicer experience to just open up an app and to kind of tweak that. So that is going to be the VG249Q, 249Q L3A. So I think that's a nice kind of starting point there.
It's crazy how many features come with these monitors, especially at that price compared to what they used to be, right? When you were looking at like a gaming monitor, you were, hundreds of dollars, and just like Yeah, it's amazing. Every year seeing better and better specs, and the price point not necessarily rising with some of them. So this is cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this monitor probably not even probably about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, you could easily be looking closer to about like the 260-ish kind of price band. So the fact that we're sub $200, right? That's quite nice, and that's the next upgrade option that I kind of want to give you at 250. So again, still being pretty reasonable. This is one of really the least expensive options that exist in the marketplace, but it's quite nice. 27 inches, 1440p. So if you're coming in that 1080p crowd and you haven't made that jump to 1440p, it's so nice because you just get more desktop real estate. You're going to get better, pixel density. It's going to look sharper. It's a great kind of, I think, kind of sweet spot for a lot of gamers, right? And even just desktop users. So same thing, you jump up to a nice high refresh rate, 180 hertz. Same thing, that fast IPS-based panel, 1 millisecond peak, gray to gray. You get the G-Sync compatibility, the variable overdrive, and actually even higher, 130% sRGB, which means you're going to get a little bit more kind of color saturation. It might look a little bit more punchy. Some people kind of like that. They kind of like the colors will pop kind of a little bit more. So that's a pretty nice addition. And this little eLMB sync, you might kind of wonder, well, what is this? This is an ASUS exclusive thing. We were kind of a pioneer in terms of implementing this, where it's called backlight strobing, but it's pretty cool because we were the first vendor to allow you to do backlight strobing, but also maintain VRR at the same time. And you might kind of wonder, what's the point of this backlight strobing? Backlight strobing will essentially sync the backlight refresh. And what it attempts to do is essentially even give you a higher level of motion clarity performance. Your brightness for your monitor will drop a bit, but your motion clarity will actually notably improve. It's quite impressive. It's pretty much similar, if anybody's ever heard anything called ULMB, which is on G-Sync dedicated monitors like our Swift series. That's what it is. It's essentially just an alternate version. ULMB is specific to NVIDIA. ELMB is what we refer to ours, but they're both essentially a form of backlight strobing technology. So I think this one at $250, again, really, really good value prop if you're looking to jump into something. And I think the last one here, I'm going to actually open up a video. So give me a second, Bob, here to drop open and open this up. But this is going to be for the guys. We're going to go to the whole other end of the spectrum, go really big.
To my spectrum.
Your spectrum. Well, what size ultra-wide are you rocking?
I have a 49.
Okay, so this is going to be a 49.
I don't think I can go back to not a 49, just because for like the productivity that it gives me is the best. So
let me go ahead and load this one up here. So this is going to be our ROG Swift QD OLED 2nd generation. It literally just started shipping a week ago. And if you guys got lucky, if there was anybody in the stream that was watching our Black Friday and Cyber Monday deals, we actually had it at launch $200 off. So you could have saved $200 on it. It's not on sale anymore. So sorry if you missed out on it. That was a quick promo that we were running. But let's go ahead and quickly take a look at this cool little video here of it.
ROG would push the limits of market.
So this is going to be 49 inches. It's going to be, like I said, a super ultra wide 2nd generation QD OLED panel. And the main reason why the 2nd generation, I specifically call that out, is because that will significantly improve the text rendering performance. OLED a lot of times kind of gets called like kind of the king of monitors and the best, but there's actually a lot of areas that traditional LCDs are still quite advantageous. So with the 2nd generation QD OLED, what's called the subpixel structure, the way that the pixels actually are oriented, is much, much better for now text clarity. I would still say that LCD is superior in terms of, if you really care about text sharpness, it's still going to hold an edge. But for me, it's finally at a level that I'd say for desktop productivity, you could at least begin to consider it as a viable kind of option. So that's nice. Some other cool things that you'll see there is we have like a graphene film material and specialized cooling designs, which are really important for OLED, because the cooler that you keep the OLED substrate material, not only you can drive higher peak brightness, which this monitor actually is rated for HDR 1000 nits. So it's really, really impressive, especially with OLED being a per pixel based emissive technology. But you want to keep that subpixel structure cool, because that can allow you to get it brighter and more dynamic, because that's another area. LCDs can get much, much brighter than OLEDs, but that also helps to mitigate and reduce the likelihood of burn-in. So some other cool things that you see there is we have an integrated cool smart KVM technology that works seamlessly. So literally you can just go from monitor to monitor. You can transfer files. It's got USB-C input with USB power delivery. So if you've got that laptop and you want to be able to power that too, you can do that. And on the top of the display, which is pretty sweet, And I'll show you a little image of it. It actually has an integrated tripod mount, which actually we've had now for about 2 years on our monitors. So that actually lets you put things like, you could put like a microphone, a camera, even a second monitor directly mounted on the top of the display without some type of accessory. It's like a threaded mount. You could even put something like a hot shoe. If you wanted to have like a microphone and a camera or something like that, you could just attach it. And there's also a top mounted USB port. So if you easily want to power supplemental devices, you could do that. So yeah, I think for a lot of people, again, if you want to go big, bright, fast, ultra responsive, this is probably going to be a pretty kind of dream monitor for a lot of people in terms of kind of its specifications. Coming in at $14.99, which actually, for what it is not that crazy in terms of, I think, the price point.
If you think,
yeah, it seems pretty affordable.
If you think about OLED and 49 inches and just a couple years ago, what you would pay for that type of display, that even just across the board, not just ASUS, but I mean, you know, all manufacturers just it keeps on going down in price, where it gets it to that point where you're like, yep, I'm gonna make the jump and go to an OLED.
Yeah, and so especially I think the exciting thing with here is with the second gen, this one is one that you could probably legitimately, like I said, begin to evaluate as an option of using it as a true kind of hybrid monitor. For a lot of people, we generally have prefaced, if you consider one of our OLED solutions, which we actually have quite a bit of them. We have everything down from 13-inch portable OLED monitors, 16, 27-inch. We've got now the upcoming 32-inch, which will come out in January. We've got the 49-inch, and then we have a 42 and 48. So we've got quite a bit. We still generally always preference it that those were content-centric or gaming-centric displays. We didn't say that they were kind of general-purpose monitors because there was still the reality about burn-in. But with the second gen, there is an improvement. I would still say there's still a reality, even with QD OLED, you still have that possibility. So that is a factor you would want to keep in mind, that you still want to be sensible about how you approach using the panel. So there's still that consideration, and that's why there can still be benefits to considering other really performance-based options like LCDs, right? But just switching over here, if we look at some of the just images quickly, if I just show you right here, I think the top mount, which is what I was going to show you. So give me a second. Let me drop out here of the video. I think you can.
That would be really cool too, because like for my camera and everything right here, I had to get another desk mount and put it up above and all that. So
exactly, yeah. Like we were kind of thinking about users, and that's the feedback that we had. So that's kind of, I think, the strength we have. So I think if I can share this on your side, I don't know if it's popping out there.
It is not. Let me remove that one. Oh, wait, there.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, and then let me go ahead and pop this over. So give me 1 second. There we go. Perfect. So you'll see we're taking a look at a top view shot, and that's what you'll actually see right there. That little threaded mount. It's a threaded mount, right? So like I said, there's so many threaded mount accessories, like little magic arms, right? Like I said, a cold shoe bracket. You can do whatever you want, right? So we've had people that put like a triple cold shoe, and they're mirrorless. They've got a side light. They've got a mic. Some people just use it as a mic. Some people take our portable XG monitors and they actually mount it there. So they've got a top mounted like 17-inch monitor on top of their ultra wide. I've seen kind of all kinds of crazy permutations. And then you can see right there, you've got that auxiliary USB port. And that is a subtle but cool feature you will find actually on many ROG Swift monitors. So if you're kind of ever wondering, again, what are some of those differences between like an ROG Swift to like a Tough Gaming, that's like those little details that you might not realize that that's also what you're paying for, but you're kind of paying for some of those other cool things. One other thing that some people don't, and I'd love to know, Bob, Ryan, for you and people in the chat, let me know. Do you calibrate your display? Based on our kind of polling and data that we know from users, close to 80% of users do not calibrate the display. They don't have a colorimeter. They don't even know how to. They just want good color quality is what they say. Yeah. So one cool thing about all ROG Swift monitors, all ROG Strix monitors, they come factory calibrated. Where Tough Gaming, the quality can actually be quite good, right? But they aren't actually factory calibrated. So it might mean that maybe you might tweak it a little bit, whether it's by eye, maybe you're downloading ICC files from the community, maybe you spend the money. I think it's worth spending $100 and getting a colorimeter and having it, because once you have it, you can use it on every display that you have forever, right? So it's kind of, to me, it's like, spend the money once, but it's always going to serve you well. But yeah, that's just a subtle little difference. If you weren't aware, ROG Swift, ROG Strix, always going to be factory calibrated. Tough Gaming wouldn't be factory calibrated.
Gotcha. Very cool. In the chat, we did have a question. Jody said he has a 14700K Z690 E-Strix, 6000 megahertz CL30 memory with a 360 millimeter Corsair cooler. What would be a rough point he should aim for in his overclock?
So that's a perfect example. I would literally tell them do the same exact thing I just showed you. Do the AIOC, because AIOC, we literally, per every generation, we test in the range of probably over 300 CPU samples, and that actually evolves. So the reality is we know way more data points than you could ever possibly know when it comes to the modeling of the frequency and the voltage frequency curve. And like you were talking, Bob, even if you think you could do better, you could still go back in afterwards and manually tune it from what we left it at for you. So if you think you can do better, go for it. But your question saying, what do I think it can get? I can tell you with the 14700K, you should be looking at the nominal range of what I showed you in my demonstration. That 13900K, 14700K is going to be binned at a little bit of a lower grade, right? Because if you just understand binning from Intel standpoint, a 9 series, an i9 is going to be a better CPU, right? It's binned a little bit to a higher tolerance, right, than a 14700. But you should probably be similar clocks. I wouldn't be surprised that you could have a few of those cores going in at 6.1, 6.2 gigahertz, right? You've got a strong enough cooling solution that you could probably be seeing similar numbers. But the great thing is you bought a really good board. You got a Dash E board. Use that feature. So if you're not using it, you're literally wasting the ability to see, hey, what's my overclock that I can get? So I would tell you, try it AIOC and see what you get.
Gotcha. What's the there's been a couple of people, I want to know what the story behind this, JJ. What's this chair for JJ hashtag
Chair for JJ.
that people are putting in the chat here?
Yeah, so
people are putting it in here.
Yeah, so not that long ago, well, actually at the last CS, we officially unveiled for our first kind of like high-end gaming chair, the SL400. We actually just recently announced the follow-up to that, which is our fabric version with the Airtheon. So we're expanding that out. So some people, when sometimes I'm doing my stream, I'm still using this guy right here. It's not a bad chair. It's whatever, just an office chair that I had here, right? Background. Yeah. But my advocates, people in the community are like, hey, you know what, JJ, I think JJ deserves one of those nicer ROG chairs, right? You know, he's such a great rep for ASUS. Why doesn't he get an ASUS gaming chair? So I've been pitching to my team. I'm hopefully the management team is going to get me one approved. And in the future, the hashtag community will be rewarded.
That's like we because we just did a couple reviews of some really nice chairs, and Ron and I were talking about just having like the same, like when you first got your computer and you set up, you had like the same $40 chair from like Comp USA or whatever it was, and you had that forever.
Yep.
Yeah. One thing I did want to talk about too is, and I know we're getting kind of late on time, but a lot of people don't know, and even I didn't know for like a while, that like ASUS makes networking products, and they're actually like we talked about this the other day, JJ and I. It's like I've had the same router, and I got a new router from another company, and I put the ASUS one back because it just worked better and everything like that. So if you want to go over some of the options you guys have.
Yeah, no problem. So I try to kind of tackle it, I think, a similar way of what we kind of talked about with some of the monitors, right? Is I want to just pick a couple of quick monitors that kind of made sense where, you know, there's a lot of people that they might still literally be on Wi-Fi 5. Maybe they haven't even made that update to Wi-Fi 6. But even with Wi-Fi 6, there's been kind of a refresh of models. And also we're seeing a really big rollout from ISP companies. So from AT&T, from Time Warner, from Comcast, that are now finally starting to push multi-gig across the country. So from a lot of these companies, they've communicated close to saying, hey, you know, 250, 300 cities nationally, we want to have by, you know, X date, they're all going to have multi-gig surface. So 2.5 gig, 5 gig, 10 gig connectivity. So for most people, that probably means them finally stepping up to 1 gig networking, or maybe even 2.5 gig networking. So I created the baseline at being a 2.5 gig option. So I want to show you one of these models that we have here, and give you a little bit of insight on some things that you kind of just want to keep in mind when you're considering a router. So this is actually the Tough Gaming AX6000. Now, it's one of our gaming line, but we have a super comprehensive portfolio. We have normal routers that are just called our RT series, which you can entirely use for gaming. And then we also have dedicated gaming product. And I'll give you a little bit of context on why we say it's a gaming router, because some people, it's like, Is that just BS, right? Like what makes it supposedly a gaming router, right? But yes, there's the aesthetic styling, but that's actually not part of the reason why we define it as actually a gaming product. So it looks pretty cool. But let's actually take a look here at the rear in terms of actually some of the images here. So give me 1 second. Let me see right here if I have it. Should be actually in this one. Sorry, didn't 100% have that image set, so it should be. Let me see here. Sorry, find the right image. There we go. Okay, so here we go on the back plane for the unit. One is that you'll actually see that this unit has dual 2.5 gig ports. So this unit comes in at 200, so not too expensive, definitely a little bit more than that. But consider right now our highest end routers can go over $700, right? So actually, $200 is pretty reasonable. So you get 2.5 gig WAN. So that means you're ready kind of right for now. If you don't even have gig, or you're going to upgrade to gig, or maybe you upgrade to 2.5G, that means your router is ready for 2.5 gig. But you also have another 2.5 gig LAN port, which is great because maybe you have a laptop, you've got a new motherboard, you've got a mini PC, something that might have that higher speed networking, and you want to be able to share files more quickly. You've also got that 2.5G, and you've also got a high-speed USB port. Now, one of the big changes with newer routers is actually their chipset. Just like a phone or a laptop or anything that now with the processing, these things have faster cores and more memory. You might be surprised, even a few years ago, basic routers had usually dual core chips, usually between like 400 to 600 megahertz. Now you're looking at routers that have quad core based processors, looking at 1.4, 1.6, 1.8 plus gigahertz, because there's a lot of processing performance they have. That means you can actually use this router like a NAS. You could attach like a USB hard drive, share that amongst there, and be able to have your kind of own local storage device that's available to you. Some of the gaming elements here is we have a dedicated gaming port. So that means if you plug your Ethernet in there from your PC, from your laptop, from your PS5 or your Xbox, it automatically prioritizes that for you in the network. You don't have to know any quality of service setup or anything like that. Literally, it just knows when you plug that in, the router goes, I'm going to prioritize that amongst anything else that's coming through the network. So that's just one of the ways that we define that as a gaming product, is we're giving you that gaming port. It's a plug and play experience, essentially. The user doesn't have to know anything. There's a lot of other really cool things that we do on the firmware side, and you got tons and tons of really cool features. One of my favorite, probably the only other one that I'll note on here, guys, because I know we're tight, is on router VPN. So if you've ever heard about VPN, normally you got to install like a VPN on a computer, or you got to install an app on your phone, or you got to do stuff like that. But here you can actually do the VPN on the router, so that every device that you're connecting can take advantage of the VPN. And we even have something called VPN Fusion, which means you can run a split. You can literally have a connection that's connected to the VPN, but another connection that's actually not under the VPN too. And that can all be done inside of the router. And unlike some other companies, we also don't have any subscription costs associated with our products. So our parental controls, our security software subscription, all that stuff is built into the cost of the unit. So you don't pay like this, oh, I want to now unlock parental controls and I got to pay some $30 a year subscription fee to the networking company. We also don't do any cloud requirement registration. So you can set this up fully independently in your local environment, and you don't have to have some cloud dependency, because even for some networking companies that have had that, if their backend was to go down, all of a sudden you could be locked from even being able to access your router, even if you were on a local network, which is, it's kind of weird because it's your router, right? That you can't access it, right? But yeah, that's the unit. So here, the other one that I want to show you is going to be the BE96. So we're kind of going from Wi-Fi 6 and we're going to go to Wi-Fi 7. So let me go ahead and bring that one up. So give me 1 second here. And for some people that are wondering, one other really cool thing that we do with ASUS as well is all of our all of our routers, not even our gaming routers. See where it is, B96, is they all support something called AI Mesh. So if you wanted to kind of pair two of them together to even give yourself more coverage, you can do that. So you could get another, let's say, AX6000 later in the future, or even other models from ASUS's lineup. So if you even wanted more coverage, you could just add it in. Literally just open up the app, say, hey, I want to add another router to give me more coverage, and I'm good to go. So really, really cool. We have literally over probably 40 models that are AI Mesh compatible. So it's a really nice feature. With the BE96, this is stepping up to the people that want the best of the best, right? Maybe you upgraded to a new Pixel phone, maybe an ROG phone, maybe you got a new ROG laptop, maybe you got a new Maximus motherboard, right? Whatever it might be, you want to take advantage of that Wi-Fi 7, you maybe got Wi-Fi 6E. Maybe you also got high speed. This is one of the highest performing units on the market. It's a tri-band Wi-Fi 7 unit. Very, very fast chipset. It's actually 2.4 gigahertz quad-core chipset. It's got 1 gig of DDR4 memory built into it. So pretty nuts. And even 10G connectivity. This guy has a 10G WAN and a 10G LAN on it. So if you've got, again, a nicer motherboard, a nicer system, and you want to have a fast kind of local network, right? You want to share files. Really, really cool. You also have that high-speed USB, and then you also got multiple things there. So 2 really, really cool units that we have there. This one just launched and is now just available. And one other really cool update that we just baked in for those of you out there that I think is pretty cool is we now actually have secondary WAN support through a simple USB connection with your phone. So if you took like your Android or your Android phone or your iPhone and you plug that to the USB port, let's say maybe your ISP service goes down, right? Normally, what would you do? You don't want a hotspot and try to have every device in your home connect to the hotspot. That would kill your battery and the performance would be horrible because it's not designed to connect to all those devices. But what we've done is we actually can bridge that. We can take your ISP service, pass that to the router, and now the router can still maintain the connection to all of your devices. So if maybe something happens where, like I said, your internet service provider goes down, but you still want to have your devices be connected, you could take your internet connection that you have from your phone and feed that to your router. And again, that's no cost to you. That's built in, something that we just added in our most recent firmware update to close to about 20 models, all got that just for free, just being able to give more people more flexibility. So a really cool feature that's also been baked in there.
Very cool.
That feature's awesome.
And I see Kevin had a little question there on backhaul. I love you, Kevin, man. You rock because you actually know a little bit about networking. So ASUS is really excited. All of our AM mesh networking technology gives you the most flexibility for backhaul. You can assign different bands wirelessly for the backhaul, or you can use Ethernet for backhaul. So if you want to get really crazy, 100%. You could run like a 2.5 gigabit across your 2 AX6000s, use that as your backhaul, and then keep both your bands open for full performance. Same thing if you had tri-band, you could do that where you could use the actual backhaul between the 2 devices and then keep all your bands available, not compromising on performance. Because if anybody doesn't know, that's the main disadvantage of a mesh product, is that if you have like 2 bands, you actually don't have 2 bands. You only have 1 band, because 1 band is always lost because that band is utilized to talk to the 2 routers. That's actually kind of the advantage of a traditional router, is by default, you always get all the bands. A mesh product will give you sometimes greater coverage, but at the expense of sometimes speed because you're losing one of the bands. So that's why sometimes you want to move up, right? If you had a dual band router that was mesh, you lose 1 band. If you go to a tri-band router, you now get 2 bands, but you lose 1 band. And then if you went to a quad band router, you still get 3 bands, but you lose 1 band. And Kevin, he's asking about the really smart way to do it, which is use Ethernet, and then you don't lose any bands. So it's the best option.
Well, Kevin's a smart guy. He came over from the Home Gadget Geeks crew, so that's where.
Very, very cool, man.
So, appreciate you being here, Kevin.
Yeah, and then we Robert also had a question. Oh wait, not that one.
So what's the difference between WAN and LAN? That makes 100%. That's a really good question. So WAN is your internet pipeline coming in. So essentially, that's the connection you're gonna utilize when you're going from your modem to the router. So that's your WAN. So that's your, essentially, just think about it, your pipeline coming in. So you want your WAN port to essentially be the speed of what your ISP service is. So for the vast majority of people in the US, they have a speed that's going to be at or below 1 gigabit, right? So most WAN ports have just been 1 gigabit. But now recently, you're starting to see more people now have essentially some form of gigabit plus or multi-gig ISP service. So I've got 1 gigabit. Bob, what are you rocking?
I have a gig, AT&T gig.
You've got gigs, so you're the same as me. Ryan, what are you rocking?
Don't ask. No,
don't ask.
I'm still grandfathered into a 300 down, 30 up, but
hey,
my options
300 down. I mean, it's not bad. I mean,
it's not terrible, but my options just are limited here. So unfortunately,
so that's all it is, right? So if you just sign up with an ISP service that had like 2.5G, but your WAN port was still only 1 gig. You're
throwing it away,
speed, right? So you wouldn't want to do that. So that's the main thing. And your LAN port, that's only for your locally connected devices, right? So when you want to connect, your security camera, your laptop, your gaming console, your receiver, whatever it might be, that's your LAN ports.
Gotcha. And then he asked about the power line adapters. If you guys have any of that type of stuff as well, I
Yeah,
know
we
we
actually
have
do
one
have
here.
power
Yeah.
line, and actually that brings up a really cool thing that I can just show an image from it. I don't really need to explain it too much, but it's kind of cool that we do have it. Is we recently released, and we're one of the only companies that has something like this. Is we actually are utilizing Mocha, and so if you've never heard the term, like what the heck is Mocha? Mocha is actually coax. So a lot of North American homes, we actually have like coax in your home. So you actually have like usually because for like cable companies, so this is actually a really good way that if you want to be able to actually have far-ranging signals and you've had maybe issues with Wi-Fi, with mesh, and you're looking for a more reliable alternative, this is actually even more reliable than some form of what we'd call like power line, which uses electrical lines inside your home, which we do have an option for that, but there can be more restrictions and more degradation with the way power line works. Coax is really reliable in terms of its stability. So the long and short of it is that you're pretty much using just a coax to create your connection. And then on the other end, you have Ethernet. So you can see you've got your coax cable there. And then on the other side, it's an Ethernet cable. And here's like a pretty kind of self-explanatory image, right? So if you had kind of your Wi-Fi solution, you know, okay, here you're sending out the signal, goes through the wall, it drops down through speed. But of course, if you run that Mocha, you run that coax cable, it's just like Ethernet. It doesn't care about the distance. It's going to pretty much give you the same exact speed across the entirety of the run. We also allow for flexibility. We have a smart toggle, which actually gives you flexibility for higher speed coax-based services that are available for ASUS 3.1. I don't believe actually any other Mocha adapters on the market even support this specification. But you can see all you do is you just run that Ethernet cable, that MOX adapter, and you're good to go. And we actually give you some cool little mounting hardware so you can orient this in different ways in your home. So depending on the way that you have that cable coming in, you can do it as a vertical or you can do it as a horizontal mount. It's not very expensive, $99, which again, if you talk about kind of the performance that it's giving you, you could be spending like $300-$400 on a mesh networking product that would perform lower than this, not have the same stability. And it's also would still be really clean, quote unquote. Like if you don't want to have like cables and stuff running that around, you're just running that coax from one floor to another floor and you just connect those two nodes and bam, you're good to go, right? So that's a new product that we recently released. And we have a couple of other routers too that actually have Mocha integrate them as well. So yeah, all you need to do is just check out our site. But yeah, we've got everything from power line to Mocha solutions to Wi-Fi 6E, Wi-Fi 7, across the board. Yeah, I mean, we got you covered one way or another.
That's very cool. Yeah, so like one of the things that I didn't think a lot of people knew is like how much networking stuff ASUS actually has. And not just from the gaming perspective, just like all the way down the line. So I think that's incredibly
cool.
You're
100%.
said at least for me, I would very highly recommend it because I've had the same ASUS. It's an ROG router, but I've had that same router for years, and I haven't had a single issue with it across the board.
I had like a RT66U or something back in the day.
Oh yeah, the
thing,
66U was super
was
perennial.
awesome.
A lot of people, rock that unit.
I used it for a long time.
Yeah, the cool thing generally about a higher end router that I will say to sometimes people, because some people will go like, oh, this one's like $100 or $130. Shouldn't I just buy that versus like $200 or $300? The one thing is you would generally outgrow your router almost maybe more quickly than any other product in a lot of ways, because most people are always adding to their environment. They're never taking away, right? So even if you start small and you've got just a phone and a laptop and a TV, think about right now how many devices you have in your home. And the other big thing is the frequency of when you upgrade. So like I said, the latest iPhones, they're Wi-Fi 6E. The latest Pixels, they're Wi-Fi 7. New laptops are Wi-Fi 7, Wi-Fi 6E. Motherboards are Wi-Fi 6E, Wi-Fi 7. If you are upgrading some of these new products and you've got an older router, you could actually be bottlenecking your device because it actually is not fully maximizing the speed. Even little things, you wouldn't believe it, battery life can be affected by your router because there's actually something that's called target wake time. It's the signaling that kind of between the router and the wireless device. Newer wireless platforms are intelligent in terms of how they ping the device and how they locate them and share that data to where they're much more efficient about it. Like an older router might keep just sending the signal and it causes the antenna to essentially kind of keep drawing battery, if that makes sense. But newer routers are much more intelligent about this. So you can actually get even better battery life, which sounds crazy, but it can actually happen. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then we'll probably have time for like one more product, and I think the product that we should talk about that we've talked about on this podcast, at least 2 episodes, I think we talked about it, was the the graphics card with the M.2 slot
Oh,
built
yeah.
in.
This one's a really cool one.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. So, so this kind of guys, you guys know we're actually the largest global manufacturer of graphics cards. We're an AMD and NVIDIA partner, so we're agnostic, but we're always thinking about cool things that we can do. And so I remember talking to Bob about this. The logic behind what we were trying to do was we saw that it was a lot of people, M.2s kind of were becoming really the hot trend amongst kind of storage. Pricing was tanking, right? You saw more and more people adding it to their systems. But it's not only until really recently, so like the Z790 board, Z690 boards, so you started really seeing motherboards with like 4, 5 M.2 slots. Even if we go into like the AM4 era, pretty much almost all AM4 motherboards had like 2 slots, unless it was like a really like high-end board, like a Crosshair Extreme or something like that. Even our Hero was only 2 slots. So there was people that kind of like, I ran out of slots. I want even more. And so we were thinking, well, what's the most common thing that sometimes people upgrade in their system over time is their graphics card. So why not merge the two, which sounds kind of crazy. So let's actually take a look at an image. Let me bring this up here. It's going to be our 4060 Ti, what we call SSD edition. And we just literally have released this. I think literally as of like yesterday, it is now actually available. And I think actually you guys, if you guys want to check it out, there'll be a review. I think actually you guys can check out on ThinkComputers in the not too distant future. So let's go ahead and take a look at this image right here. So this is going to be, let me go ahead and share this over with you guys. For reference, it's using our dual card right here, which you'll see the image here in a second, but it's our compact based design. So it's quite nice. It's a 2.5 base design, 2.5 slot based design. So that means it'll fit in anything. You know, you can put this in a mini ITX based build. You can put it in a ATX based build. Nice and cool, compact, very, very easy. It's cool, quiet, and very efficient. But what you're going to see that's so different than anything that you've never seen before is that on the back, there's actually an M.2 slot on it. And you'll see that it actually also has that little Q latch design, which some of you may be familiar that this is another kind of ASUS innovation that we introduced for easy M.2 installs. That same thing. It's just an easy, just angle it in there, put it in, you're good to go. Now, if you go ahead and see, we do account then for even additional thermal dissipation. There's a secondary heatsink. So some people go, isn't it hot? In reality, it's actually much cooler than the temperature on a motherboard, because if you think about most of the time where the M.2 SSD is located on a motherboard, you see right here, my big graphics card, the M.2 slots are generally underneath the graphics card. So you actually have more limited airflow in that spacing than you do here. In this design, it's actually getting direct active airflow because the fan that you have literally in the front here is literally blowing air and it's hitting the drive. So the temperatures actually in our testing generally range from about from about 7 to about 10 degrees plus in terms of actually cooler operation. So you'll see it's a great looking card. You can go ahead and you see you've got the thermal pad in there, the heatsink. It's pretty simple. Now, the kind of design work that we did here in terms of what we were looking to do in terms of how do we make this happen? It's actually using something called PCI bifurcation, and also the fact that the GPU doesn't use all the PCI Express lanes. So this GPU, it only uses 8 express lanes. So technically when you put it in, those 8 lanes are doing nothing. They're just kind of chilling out there going like, yep, I lost, right? Because you can't do anything with them. So we thought, why not actually take those lanes and give it to the actual SSD and allow you to take advantage of that slot. So that's what we're doing, is we're enabling that PCI bifurcation and we're taking advantage of that. And there's no performance penalty. The graphics card, it's still the same level of performance. The GPU's performance in terms of the FPS is not affected. The SSD's performance, since you're using PCI Express lanes, is also the same too. So it's literally performing the same performance if you actually put it on the slot on the motherboard. Since we actually officially launched it, I can show you actually a little here of the performance data. So let me actually bring this up quickly here. I think I actually have a rough file here. So give me 1 second. I have it here.
And one thing that that JJ and I talked about was one of the best implementations of this is in like a small form factor system where you have that, you know, mini ITX motherboard that maybe has 1, 2, sometimes you find 3 slots, but it just gives you the ability to add more storage to that small form factor system, which is
And
definitely
more easily, I think, is the big one, right? Because even if you're in a small system, how easy is it going to get to if it's on the back of the motherboard, right? Or it's like
yeah.
underneath something. Here, it's just so much easier where, hey, it comes along for the ride. I can literally take it out, I can mount it in there, and I can slot it in. And the cost delta is very minimal. So, we already sell this card for the MSRP price on the market, right? So you pay a $30 price delta between our standard dual model and between the M.2 SSD model. So I think that's quite reasonable to go, hey, I'm already getting a really nice, good looking card that's compact, that's cool, that's quiet, but I can also now have some additional M.2 SSD slot that's on there, right?
This product's funny because if you would have launched this, around the springtime, people would be like, "Is this like an April Fool's type of joke?" It's almost that it's so almost wild out there that they're like, "There's no way this is real." But it's such a cool product that mixes, like you said, you're taking advantage of those lanes that wouldn't normally be used. You're adding expandability to your system. Very cool. I know Shinny Gaming in the chat said, "Is this something that a new NVIDIA driver could cause issues with, though, or does it
No,
use separate drivers for
it's
those
pretty
lanes?"
much it's
Just
passively
pass through.
like
Yep.
it's pretty much isolated. So there's no aspect in terms of the graphics card operation that you have to kind of be cognizant of or that you need to do anything special to. The only thing that you literally need to do on the motherboard side is your motherboard does need support PCI bifurcation support, but that is fairly common. I don't want to say universally because not every motherboard will have that. We do have a QVL that lists that, but we have a very expansive list. Take, for instance, like a huge number of like all our B550 motherboards. We have B450 models that all support PCI bifurcation. And if anything, it kind of even works better as a feature even on kind of more entry motherboards because probably the more entry motherboards are even more likely to maybe only have even maybe one slot, right? Not even maybe two. So if you kind of think about those people that they're buying something like this, like, just a solid mid-range GPU, but then they also get that slot. It's just a nice value add, right? And it doesn't affect anything from power because if you talk about the power envelope of an M.2 drive, it's generally in about the 10 watt range. So it's not like, all of a sudden I had to go from like a 500 watt power supply and I need 850 watts or something like that, right? So it's a really easy thing. So here I'm going to show you a slide. It does say confidential, but we are okay to denote this a little bit here in terms of the performance data. But I'm sure you guys will probably see a little bit more performance testing. But you can see this right here. So you can go ahead and bring this up. But you can see here some of our internal benchmarking reference, right? So here you can see a Gen 4 slot. And this is the other thing I kind of didn't tell you is that this is actually supports even Gen 5 drives. So if you did put it in on like a micro ATX board that has Gen 5, and this is odd enough, most micro ATX boards, so like a B760 motherboard, wouldn't have a M.2 Gen 5 slot because cost-wise, it's actually pretty expensive to do that on a motherboard, so you won't get that. And same thing, on a mini ITX board, very few companies, and I know because we make them, you're not going to get that PCI Express Gen 5 slot. You would get like a Gen 4 slot in terms of that. But this is actually support Gen 5. But of course, you have to have a CPU and a board combination that facilitates Gen 5 support. But you can see right here, native Gen 5 slot on the motherboard was a little bit over 12 gigs, right? And here about 11.8 gigs. And then we can see right there, 12.3 gigs and 11.7 gigs. So effectively, you see it's essentially the same performance. There's no difference between running it on there, but it is actually also going to be cooler. So like I said, the temperature wise, it's actually cooler. It's just as fast. It's easier to install. Like I said, for $30, it's just also a cool little additional level of flexibility you have in your build. So I'd love to really see what the community thinks. We know this is kind of like testing the waters, right? As far as this is something new, it's a little bit different. But hopefully, if people like it, just like some of our other kind of unique graphics card models that we've brought to market, things like our Noctua edition, our ProArt cards, which are designed with a specialized kind of form factor approach, SL series, which are actually fully passive graphics cards. They literally don't have any they don't have any fans. They're just fully passive. We do stuff like that because we realize, not every single card is going to work for every single person. There's different reasons that have different designs for different people, right? Ranging from features, functions, and aesthetics. So overall, pretty cool.
And somebody asked if there's a size limitation for the M.2.
No, it's just like a slot that you have on the motherboard side. So we've tested. I think we have gone ahead and done validation already up to the 8 terabyte, which 8 terabyte is pretty much right now the biggest you can get because M.2. I know a lot of people love it. Personally, I prefer U.2 and U.3 more because it's not thermally constrained and it's not density constrained. So you Like in my personal rig, I've got a 20 terabyte U.2 drive because I don't have to use all these PCIe slots. I can just use one single drive. It's a lot more efficient, right? But yeah, no, capacity wise, no restrictions. So a 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, 3, 4, whatever you want to put in there, it works the same.
Very cool.
And even from that perspective, the actual contact is we have a thermal pad on both sides. So some M.2 SSDs, let me see if I show you here. I can show this. Yeah. So here I can show an example of this. Yeah, this should work here. Here you guys. So you can see right here, if we take a look at two M.2 SSDs, this M.2 SSD has the NAND. It's only on one side. And so this has been pretty common for a large amount. But as we're now getting to even higher and higher densities, you might see that there might be NAND on the front and on the back. Okay. And in some situations, you may want actually a cooling design that actually is accounting for both sides. There's also, of course, the controller, which can get pretty hot on like high-end Gen 4 and Gen 5 drives. So we have accounted for essentially that within our design. And that's even if you actually take a look at even on the motherboard side. I think I can show you that a little bit more easily. Actually, if I look at that motherboard here, you can see right here. That's why the heatsink, as you can see, it's not even physically on here, but this board actually has a heatsink that's underneath with a thermal pad, because you can see that that's going to make contact with the bottom. And then when you put the actual heatsink on top, you're also going to make contact. And that's actually kind of like a differentiation point as you start to get to a little bit higher end boards as well. You get boards where instead of just like this slot where you see there's nothing there. Sorry, you can see this one, right? 3 of these slots are all dual contact design, and then 2 slots are standard, right? So there you go.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely some cool products. We'll have to get you back on again to kind of go over some of the other stuff. Maybe after CES.
I was gonna say we'll have a bunch of brand new stuff. Hopefully,
yeah,
too,
brand new stuff to talk about. Well, we do. If you guys do go to our show notes page, we did have everything that we did want to talk about, but obviously we're kind of constrained.
Yeah, there's always too much to talk about, and JJ likes to talk it up too. So
yeah, no, it's always good, and you always learn stuff from JJ.
Absolutely.
He's one of the few people in the industry that knows what he's talking about. He's not just like reading off a script, which is always good. So
well, I appreciate that, guys. It's been fantastic to be able to talk a little bit of tech with you guys, especially for guys that have been in the industry for so long and been able to see so much. And hopefully you guys have seen some cool stuff as far as what we do. And at the end of the day, we do it for the community. So if you guys have thoughts and feedback on anything you've seen, feel free, let us know. You can hit us up across our social channels. I also help to run along with our recent, actually new community manager, Lee. We have a great, what we call PC DIY group community. You can check out where we cover about all of the latest and greatest from ASUS. Yeah. So if you ever want to join it, feel free to check it out. We have people that share their builds. They ask about networking upgrades, monitors, our peripherals, our mice, all kinds of, we cover literally every product there. If you want to know about the ins and outs of what we're doing, you'll find out there before anywhere else. We're literally talking about it there.
Yeah, and so JJ is always good to get back to people. If people are having an issue or a question, he's always I always see him in the Facebook group replying to people, and they get back to people pretty quickly. So
yeah. Well, we try to be a conduit, right? The reality is at the end of the day, PC DIY, it can be pretty complex. It can be pretty easy too, it just depends on what you're doing. But we think that it's just one of the ways that we give back, is I think being a premium vendor, we want to be able to offer people that opportunity to be able to get some official kind of feedback perspective, right? Saying like, hey, why am I seeing this? Or what do you guys think about this? Or how maybe I can circumvent this? Like DDR5 is a great example of that, right? A lot of people, there's a lot of nuances about stuff like that. And we have like a full like DDR5 insight post where I've explained like what you want to keep in mind, what are some of the limitations of the architecture, how you can kind of address certain things, stuff like that. So, but it's been great talking, guys. Fantastic to have you also joining us here on the stream. So hopefully you found it somewhat informative. And like I said, keep it tuned. ThinkComputers is going to have you guys covered with some awesome coverage for CES 2024. And I can tell you guys, I can't tell you what we're going to announce, but I can tell you that we've got some absolutely amazing products. And one of them, I think, may be one of the most disruptive announcements maybe in the last 10 years of PC hardware. So we're very, very excited about unveiling. And some people might have seen teasers from it, but unveiling essentially the formal launch edition versions of what we call our BTF ecosystem. So if you are team no cables, you're going to see a lot more about this coming at CES 2024. So make sure to keep it tuned.
Yeah, nice. We're definitely excited for all of that. So we'll go ahead and let you go, JJ. If everybody, I know if once you leave, your stream will go down, but you can continue on our stream at ThinkComputers. We have some things to talk about, definitely GTA 6. But JJ, thanks again for stopping by. And
yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, we'll see you in a month, I guess. At CES.
All right, sounds good, guys. Take care. Take it easy. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thanks for coming.
And thanks for everybody joining us on the stream. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
See ya.
All right.
Always good
lots
to
of good
listen
products.
to JJ. Like he said, he can talk forever, and it's like he's not just rambling, like you said, or just reading off a script. It's like he knows the ins and outs of everything, and if he doesn't, he knows the exact person to get that information that you need from and get it back to you. So it's always
that's the cool thing, I think, is that JJ's an enthusiast, and it's just like he gets excited about the products. It's not just
absolutely.
You know, that's the coolest thing. But lots to look forward to. He did show me some sneak peeks of some things. So obviously, like he said, can't talk about it, but there's some really cool things coming from ASUS, and we'll definitely be showing you that stuff at CES. So definitely stay tuned for all of that. But as I said, we did want to talk about I guess we'll talk about GTA 6, where we're not going to go over
I don't even want to talk about it.
You don't want to talk about it?
I'm just so butthurt.
You watched the trailer. I'm sure everybody here. It was actually the trailer beat Mr. Beast's record for the most views in 24 hours, like over 7 million. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the trailer came out, and it looks like a GTA game. Like I wasn't necessarily like there wasn't anything in it that I was like completely blown away about. The graphics look good, obviously. I mean, but the thing is, you're comparing it to a game that actually came out in 2013. So it's like,
right. Well, and everything you see right now, like if you think of GTA 5, everything you see is in game, right? You don't see the trailer. Whereas this trailer we saw is all rendered scenes. There was no gameplay in there, which is fine, right? I didn't expect to see any gameplay footage inside of it. I don't know, man. It just I'm worried about like some of the things they showed there, like making their way to real life. I've been seeing like these street takeover videos and stuff, and I'm like, no,
here's
this looks like it's. Go ahead.
Well, here's the thing: is that there's like at least 5 or 6 scenes from the trailer that are taken from real life things. So like,
absolutely,
the lady with the 2 hammers, that's like real. That's like from a real video. Like all these viral moments that were on like TikTok and
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so there's like, and they're all like Florida. They're like, you know, like crazy, like
Florida man.
Yeah. Like there was I saw a TikTok earlier today that was like it showed all the scenes in the GTA trailer that were based off things that happened in real life, which is kind of crazy. Cool. But yeah, I mean, 2025. So I was the person that was like, please say it's available next week. I was just like wishful thinking, like, right. So, but yeah, 2025, which seems reasonable. I do think it's going to be end of 2024, maybe, you know, they're going to be like, oh, it's been pushed back. It's been pushed back, and it'll be 2026, 2027. We've seen that happen with so many games. So this does give them a lot of leeway, a lot of time to build hype. I mean, there was so much hype just around this trailer. And then the other big thing is no PC launch. So
that's why I didn't even want to talk about it. I'm just like,
if you go to their official,
I mean, they didn't confirm that it's not going to be on PC, but just the launch. Right.
It's not going to launch on PC. So
yeah,
on the website it says PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series XS in 2025. So
do you think that gives us also any news that, like, obviously they couldn't mention it if they were, but it's like, oh, and now PlayStation 6 and Xbox whatever, right? Like,
yeah,
that's a possibility that we have new consoles then in 2025.
Yeah, again, if it gets delayed, we get into that next series. I think, you know, 2013 was like a different time, especially for like console and PC games. But I think it's just disappointing to me because we've seen this too over the years that, you know, games come out on all platforms and like the PC game is completely messed up. Like it's not even playable.
Sure.
Right? Like we've seen it, and we don't want that to happen with a game like this. Right. But at the same time, I mean, it's not like Rockstar is like this little developer. Right.
Yeah.
Like You could launch it at the same time.
Is it Xbox close enough? I mean, I don't know. I'm just talking out my mouth, obviously. But is it Xbox close enough to a Windows box that like really?
I think the thing is, and too, I mean, in 2025, we're going to have a new graphics architecture from NVIDIA, right? So, and possibly one from AMD, and they have to deal with all that. Like, I get it, but we waited. I forget how many years. I think it was like 2017 or something like that until you got GTA 5 on PC. Yeah. That's long. So that's a long time. So, what is your guess for GTA? Like, how long from when it launches initially till we get it on PC? Like, how long do you think?
12 to 18, probably.
Month? Okay.
Yeah, months. Yeah.
Yeah, I would.
Which is like just so depressing.
It is. Now, I don't think you're that big of a GTA fan.
No, like I was thinking about this. I was like, I'm not going to go buy a console just to play this. I'll wait.
Yeah, so you'll wait. So I would wait too. I don't have enough time to play video games. That too, but it's just so that's kind of the GTA stuff. Again, we don't want to talk about too much news because we're getting up close to 2 hours here for the podcast, which would be one of our longest ones. But yeah, like I said, I'm just glad that we have something that says like when it's going to be out and something to look forward to. Yep. It's this past year, and
it could be the end of 2025 for all we know.
Yeah, we covered a bunch of stories that were, it could be here's some leak footage. We saw the leak footage stuff over the summer, so it's good that we have a date. Sad that it's not going to be on PC, but it definitely gets people excited. I mean, 70 million views on the trailer in 24 hours is wild.
That's nuts.
Yeah, so it's definitely wild. So,
and Mr. Beast had just broken that record like a couple months ago, I think.
Yeah, or something like that. So, really, like I said, really cool to see that. Another thing we did want to mention, we are giving away a graphics card, guys. So we're giving away an RTX 4070. If you do go to our website, here, I'll bring it up here. So if you go to our website, it just says contests up here, and it's the first one right here. All our contests are extremely easy to enter. We do it all through Gleam. You just like enter your information in here. And then once you enter your information, you can like follow us on social media, things like that. And this is running till like the end of December. So lots of time to enter, but we want to let you guys know about that because we want to get back to you guys, of course, our community. So giving away an RTX 4070, which is definitely awesome there for sure. And then we did want to talk about what we have coming up next week on the website. So I'm taking a look at a case from Thermaltake. It is their Series 4 or Series 300 case, which is a smaller version of their Series 500. I have the TG ARGB, which comes with the ARGB fans. High airflow case. It's going to be great for just like a simple build. But yeah, I'll be taking a look at that, which I'm kind of...
Does yours have the screen?
They did send me the screen. So this screen right here is an add-on, but they sent me the screen. So that will be part of the review is the screen. So we'll be able to see what that's going to be able to do there as well, which is definitely cool there. Also taking a look at an NVMe SSD from Patriot, their Viper Gaming. This is their VP 4300 Lite. And I've been testing this. It's really fast. Read speeds up to 7,400 megahertz, or not megahertz, 7,400 megabytes a second, and then write speeds up to 6,400 megabytes a second. Does not ship with a heatsink, but again, all of our new motherboards will have heat sinks on it. 5-year warranty on this. You can get it up to 4 terabytes. So stay tuned for that next week. And then Ryan's taking a look at a pretty interesting product. I don't know if you have it there.
I unplugged it so I could have some room here on my desk. But yeah,
what is that?
The Tour Box. This is the Neo version. So it has all these dials and buttons on it for helping you with multiple types of applications, specifically really designed for content creation, right? So you can use the dials and knobs, buttons to change brushes, zoom in on your timeline, all sorts of things. You can customize it. There's presets in the software for it for different applications that they've kind of said, hey, these are like very common setups you might want to use. So they're set, but you can also customize them and set different settings for.
Have you been using that with your video editing?
I have. Yeah. Still getting used to it, like the feel. I think like it's a tool, and I don't want to give away too much, but like the more time you spend with it is just like, I think it's almost like an exponential curve of experience. Like at the start, it's going to be slow. It's kind of that hockey curve. And then it like, once you like get used to it, it can really up your efficiency quite a bit.
Nice.
So yeah.
Well, we'll have that next week as well. I totally just realized that I went through the notes and I completely skipped our reviews that we did this week. I don't know how I did that, but
you did. Yeah, I noticed
we'll do really quickly because again, we want to get into some gaming tonight, which we will do. But first, the Crucial X10 Pro, which is this little guy right here. This is a little portable SSD. I absolutely love this form factor compared to some of the other ones, just because it is so small. Like, I mean, it's just tiny little SSD. The cool thing about this one is it's USB 3.2 Gen 2x2. So 2000 megabytes a second read and write, or 2100 and 2000 for the read and write. So super fast, metal casing, really great drive. So we have that review. And again, links to all this is in our show notes for everything. So if you guys do want to get more information on these reviews. And then our second review is of this memory. And we just had JJ on from ASUS. And you have to say that these would go, what would these go well with?
Well, those will go good in the ProArt builds.
Yeah,
on the boards with a ProArt card. Absolutely.
Yeah, so these are Lexar's Thor OC DDR5 memory kits, and really tight timings on these as well. So these are actually the highest performing DDR5 they run at 6,000 megahertz, so not insanely fast, but because they have tighter timings, they're going to give you better performance overall. And they were the best performing 6,000 megahertz DDR5 kit that we've tested so far. But again, like I just like as soon as I saw these, well, one black and gold because I'm from Pittsburgh, but it's like this gold is more of like the gold that you would see on like ProArt motherboards and graphics cards and things like that. So yeah, really cool. And it has like this, it's kind of hard to see like the design there, but it's called Thor because it has like that kind of Nordic style design built into the heat spreader.
The Nordic knot,
and
whatever they're called. Yeah.
And again, we've seen so many of these ProArt builds and ProArt theme builds. One thing that you don't see on a lot of them is RGB lighting. Like you don't see RGB lighting, and just because it allows the black and gold of the ProArt builds to kind of show. And with these, as you can see, there's no RGB lighting on these either. So they're just going to look great in your build and not be distracting there as well. So those are our reviews for the week. At the end of each one of our podcasts, we do a question of the week. And this question has a lot to do with GTA 6 because that's kind of the biggest news story of the week is what was the first Grand Theft Auto game you played?
GTA 3 on PlayStation 2.
Okay.
So I didn't have a PlayStation 2, but one of my buddies when I was in college, his roommate had a PlayStation 2, and it's like as soon as that game came out, he got it. And so like anytime we weren't in class, we were over there just hanging out, like just messing around, causing chaos in that game. Yeah, that was the first one.
Yeah, I played the original Grand Theft Auto. Yeah, the top down. And the thing that I most remember from the game was just like the open, like again, because you are used to playing like Doom. I get that because it came out in '97, the original, and you're used to playing like Doom or Quake or like those kind of games, and just the open worldness of it was just cool. And it was like
your jam.
There was you could just drive around if you wanted to, which was cool. Like you didn't have to go through missions, which was cool. Like you could just drive around. And I think that's why that game had become what it has, is because you don't have to necessarily like play the game. You can just drive around and have fun and kind of do whatever you want in the game. So yeah, the original was a lot of fun. It was a different game too. It was just like this is pretty interesting for what it was, and it's crazy to see what it's come into. So. So yeah, guys, that is basically it for the podcast. Again, thanks for JJ for coming on, because he always has a lot of cool stuff to talk about, and lots of cool stuff coming up from them and from us. We have a lot of cool reviews coming up, so definitely stay tuned. If you do want to follow us, it's just ThinkComputers basically on everything. So everybody who's here from the ASUS stream, you can just find us on pretty much any social media. Just ThinkComputers, all one word. Of course, the website is thinkcomputers.org as well. Definitely thanks everybody for coming out. We had a bunch of people in the chat. Of course, some of our regulars like Corey, we had Nelson in there, Shinny Gaming's in there, and a ton of other people. We definitely thank everybody for coming out, and we're going to jump on and play some Apex Legends. So that stream will be up over on Twitch. So we have our Twitch stream. It's twitch.tv/ThinkComputers. Ryan runs that stream. So if the game plays bad, you just yell at Ryan.
Yep. Bob does.
Yeah, I yell at Ryan all the time. So we'll be playing some Apex Legends over there at twitch.tv/ThinkComputers. Again, thanks everybody for coming out, and we will see everybody next week.